There we go. All right. Okay, so yesterday you guys completed sort of like a little introduction to the concept of evolution. We did sort of like a little sidebar here on note taking, and then there were some questions for the text. And then the second part here was on this idea of natural selection, nature choosing which traits in a population are the best for survival, and then how the subsequent generation, because it's been selected for, will have more of that trait than the previous generation over time. That's what leads to evolution. This is the driving force for evolution. And then you guys did a little lab that basically demonstrates that concept. That lab, that digital lab there, I'd normally do even if we're in the classroom, because it's kind of hard to simulate evolution with just in the room. So although I suppose there are ways that you could do it, but anyway, I think it's a fairly good lab activity. It definitely shows how natural selection works. So from those questions, which are I guess the assessment questions that are underneath the lab, or page 303, 2, 4, 6, and 7. Does anybody have questions that you'd like me to go over right now? I changed some settings, by the way, in the live stream settings, and the latency should be considerably lower. I'm told that it should be 1 second or less based on my settings. So I'm hoping that this is a lot smoother regarding that. In order to do that, I had to turn off the closed captioning. If anybody is really using the closed captioning, maybe due to a hearing issue, or you just really benefit from closed captioning, please tell me. I will. It's not usually problematic. I can turn that back on, but it does increase the latency a fair bit. No questions? One other thing I wanted to mention really quickly: when you're asking questions, especially during the live stream, if you wouldn't mind letting me know if I've answered your question, that'd be awesome. When you ask a question in class or face to face with somebody, and that person is answering your question, that person also looks at you, at your face, and to try and get a feel for whether or not you are understanding what is being said, or whether or not they're actually addressing what you had originally asked. So I like carefully watch to see if the person is understanding, or being oh yeah, yep, or being and if they're giving me the second face, the face, then I can change gears and use some different examples and stuff. But I have none of those tools here when I'm talking over the live stream. I'm basically just saying it to avoid, to nothing. Just hoping. I think that was it, I guess. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. So so if you wouldn't mind, after you ask a question, just let me know if that answered it. You're oh yeah, that makes sense, or I get it, or thanks, or something. You don't have to thank me, but just let me know that I'm on the right track, that answered your question, or I don't get what you're saying. Can you elaborate on this? Give me something. Give me something to work with. I'm just saying it to a screen, so I'm hoping very much that people are understanding what I'm saying, but you very well may not be understanding anything. So just if you wouldn't mind. That's why I usually ask afterwards, if you haven't said anything, did I answer your question? And sometimes people never get back to me. People never respond and say, yes, you did. And if you don't answer, I have no idea whether you left, or I have no idea whether I'm even speaking to you. I don't know. So just let me know if I'm actually answering your questions or not. Okay, if you haven't had a chance to complete the quiz yet for the plants unit, please take some time during Learning Block 3 today to finish that. I noticed a number of people have had some technical problems recording for their plants presentations. Let's try and work those out today. Email me if you're still having problems. I'm trying to do my best to give some technical advice to try and get stuff working, but it's kind of hard without being able to see your screen. And even if I can see your screen, I don't own a Chromebook, so I'm Googling a lot of these solutions here. It's too bad that there's so much difficulty recording stuff. I mean, it is one of the primary ways that we have to assess you, is to just tell me about a thing, and I'll watch it, you know, or at least record it so that I can hear it. So let's try and get that figured out. It's a tool you're almost certainly going to use in the next quad. I don't know. We're certainly going to be at least hybrid learning model next quad. For the first bit, you guys know that we're all distance for at least a week, or maybe it's 2 weeks. I have to look at the announcement, but it could very well be full distance for the entire quad. So definitely going to want to get those camera and microphone issues worked out. You're very likely going to use them. So anyway, just let me know if you're still having those problems. All right, for day 20. I'm going to try and talk less, by the way, in my intro today, give you more time to do this stuff. So yesterday we talked about just this idea of what is evolution in general and what's the evidence for it, and what is the main mechanism by which evolution operates, which is natural selection. The idea that this environment is choosing what is the best trait for survivability, and that's what gets passed on to the next generation. So today, what we're going to talk about here is that idea in a little bit more detail. Okay, so natural selection can work in a whole bunch of different ways. It can, for example, select the extreme of a particular trait. So I'm not going to go through the entire lesson here in like fast forward, but imagine that you've got an animal. Oh man, I'm going to try and drawing again. This is going to be brutal. A dog. Oh no. Oh jeez, this is gonna look horrible. Oh, I'm so sorry. I should just stop drawing things. What am I doing? A dog. Why is it? The eyes are funny. A dog. Okay. Oy, oy, oy. Okay, oh no. That's bad. Okay, let's say, there we go. That is an absolutely hideous dog. Sorry. This is like some kind of a dachshund. I don't know what happened here, guys. Okay, here we go. Dog. And in its environment, let's just look at one particular genetic trait as applied to this organism. And of course, evolution is working on all of the traits of an organism at a particular time. If there is a selective force at work where one type of that trait is more preferable for survival than the other. But let's just look at one aspect here. Okay, so let's say that there's a gene in this animal, in this dog, for neck length. Okay, and I'm talking about wild dogs, although this is a dachshund, which is not a wild dog, but just work with me on this. And in its environment, its food source, get this junk out of the way here. In the environment, its food source grows on these long plants. Okay, it's like a shrubbery. This might be a terrible example because dogs are carnivores pretty much, but okay, let's say that this is an herbivorous dog or herbivorous animal. And honestly, you could say it's any animal. It doesn't really look like a dog anyway, but okay, so its food source is up high. Okay, so in this case, the dogs that are going to be able to access this food source are the ones that are going to be preferred in this particular environment. Okay, in another environment, maybe it's a different food source. It's not on a high plant or whatever. Okay, but in this particular environment, the selective pressure is saying, oh, if you can reach this, that's good. You are more likely to survive. So what happens here is that the shortest dogs, the ones with the tiny legs, are going to be the least likely to survive here. And the ones with the absolute longest legs that's hideous. That's the ones with the longest legs are the ones that are going to be the most likely to survive. So what we end up with here is a selective pressure towards the extreme. That is, the tallest dog always survives in this particular case. until the population starts being relatively tall in general, in which case then we're going to start getting always selection towards this height, because if the dog is too tall at some point, if the dog is really, really tall, then it's also going to be hard to access the plants because they got to bend way down in order to get them, and maybe that requires more energy or something. But so what that looks like then is if you were to graph this in terms of survivability, okay, and then this is height down here, and you were to look at the distribution, okay, so this is the number of dogs in the population. If the population used to look like this, okay, and usually most traits in a population follow a normal curve, okay, this is called a normal distribution, where the average is the most common, and the further you get away from the average, the less common it is. This is like this with humans too. So if this was like human height, like right in the middle here, like the average height for males would be like 5'10" or 5'9" or something, 5'9" probably. Okay, and then the further you get away from 5'9", the less likely it is to find in the population. Okay, so if, like, for example, being like a 4'10" or whatever, that would be like over here. Like very, very few people are 4'10", or if you're looking at like 6'7" or something. Okay, like very few people in the population are 6'7". That'd be like over here. So the most common is the average. Okay, that's that typical population. Whoops. Typical curves follow this is called a normal distribution. Okay, so what happens here in a situation like this is that this part of the distribution is the best to survive. Okay, being on the extreme here makes you more survivable, which means that the lower heights, these, are not good. Okay, this is less good for survival because you're not tall enough. So over time, you actually see a shift in the distribution curve, and so it did look like this, but now it looks like this. Oop, hold on, I got the wrong tool here. Go back. Now it looks like this. Okay, so what's happened is that you've got a shift. So the curve was like this, but because the average height, the highest height, is favored, you're going to get a shift in the population. So now this becomes the average. Okay, and that's directional selection. It's when one direction of movement in a particular trait is favored. Okay, you move in one direction, and that's just one of the potential patterns for evolution. I go through all these in the note. Okay, in the recording of the note, but I just wanted to just quickly here give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So when I say that evolution works in certain ways, in certain patterns, okay, so this is one possible pattern for evolution. It can select for the extreme of a particular trait and move the population towards the extreme over time. All right, that's directional selection. And so the first little part here is going to talk about the different potential patterns that can come when natural selection acts on a population. There's a note package here that goes along with this that includes this note. Okay, and there's the beginning of the note here is a reference to the lab activity. I refer to the lab activity a number of times in the note, and I talk about, oh, this is what you saw in your lab activity. That's why we do the lab first. The idea is that you've seen these patterns. Some of them actually happen in the lab. So if you haven't done the lab activity, make sure you do the lab activity. You probably did yesterday, but if not, make sure you do. The second video here is just giving some examples in nature. Okay, so this is a Bozeman science video, and it talks about a whole bunch of different examples of these types, these patterns of selection in nature: directional selection, stabilizing selection, disruptive selection, sexual selection. Those are the four, by the way, that you need to know. So it's going to go through those examples and just show you some places in nature where we can clearly see this happening, or where it has happened. Okay, I mean, it's happening all the time, but there are some more obvious examples. Okay, and once you've done that, there are some questions from the text. It's on page 335. It's number 5 to 8. These questions are asking you to identify what type of selection is happening in each of these circumstances and why. Okay, so which pattern of evolution are we looking at? So that's the first part. It's all looking at like the ways in which natural selection can act on a population with some examples, and you should know what those 4 key patterns of evolution are. Okay, that's what you're getting out of, and sort of how to identify them. That's what you're getting out of the first half. In the second half, we're going to be looking at what happens when this happens over a very long period of time. Okay, so when you get this selective pressure happening over a really long period of time and on multiple traits, okay, so now we're not talking just about height. We're talking about like the height has shifted, maybe the coloring of the animal has changed over time to help it avoid predators, or maybe to disguise itself from its prey to make it easier for it to sneak up on its prey, or maybe its coat color has changed to protect it from the sun, or I don't know, whatever. When a number of different factors change over time, what ends up happening is that this individual, this population, would no longer be able to mate with members of the previous population. So if in one geographical area, like let's say that you're looking at a map here. Oh, this is my like terrible map of Ontario. Ugh. Let's say this is a map of Ontario. And the you've got all of these population changes, high trees, coat color, whatever. All that is happening to this grouping of animals in this area. Okay, so the environment in this area is selecting for all of those different traits. And then in a different area, maybe you've got different habitats. You got different prey or different food source, whatever, if it's plants. You've got different temperature considerations, whatever. Okay, so you have different environmental considerations in this area, and so there are other different selective pressures acting in this area. Okay, so this is geographic separation here between the two. What will happen over time is that eventually the population in the blue area here is not going to be able to mate with the population from the red area for whatever reason. So maybe they don't recognize each other anymore. So during mating season, when they look for each other, they're like, I don't know what that is. Like, that doesn't look like a member of my species, so they can't mate with it. Or maybe a change has occurred in the population so that they're like sexual organs don't fit together anymore. You know, like what if the members of the females of the species are so tall that the males like can't interact with them any longer of the other grouping? Or maybe there's been such a dramatic change in genetics in one of these changes that the genetics are no longer compatible. Maybe they've had an evolutionary change where there's an additional chromosome or one less, or something along those lines. Okay, so if that happens, then and these two groupings can no longer mate with each other and produce fertile offspring. Well, that's the definition of a species. So this is going way, way back now to the very first thing that we covered in the entire semester, which was what is a species. So if you remember, the definition of species is a grouping of animals, a population where the individuals can produce fertile offspring with each other. Okay, so the key here is that they can mate with each other and produce fertile offspring. So once these two groupings can no longer produce fertile offspring in their natural environment, then they're no longer the same species. And so that process of no longer being able to make fertile offspring is called speciation. And that is the origin of all species. So all species are coming from this idea where we had a common ancestor, and then for whatever reason, we were no longer able to produce fertile offspring with another grouping from that common ancestor, and now we're different species. So if we look at our close relatives in, for example, like chimpanzees or bonobos, we are genetically incompatible with our closest neighbor. Those aren't from an evolutionary perspective our closest neighbor overall. We're going to spend a whole day talking about human evolution, but they are our current closest And there was a split at one point where we became genetically incompatible with each other. You cannot have a baby with a chimp. Not that you'd want to, but they're genetically incompatible. They have a different number of chromosomes. It's simply not possible. Okay, so that's the idea of speciation. There's a little blurb here you can read. And then I have some videos here. These are excellent videos that go over the process and talk about different examples of speciation. And then you're going to read chapter 8.2 in your text. And you're going to answer the questions in this Google Doc. There it is. Just looking for it. So here I've actually put the questions for today into a Google Doc. The ones in the textbook are a little meh. So I grabbed some of my own questions here. These are a little bit more targeted and will help you do a better review of the content that I need you to know. So you might want to consider actually having these questions open first and quickly just looking them over before you watch the videos and do the textbook reading, because I mean the answers to these are in the videos in the textbook reading. So if you know what you're looking for, it'd actually probably be helpful. So I would recommend reading these first, or at least glancing at them so you know what you're looking for. And then once you're done that, there's a little exit quiz that goes along. Okay, you don't need to hand in the Google Doc or anything, but I will say that there are questions on identifying the types of speciation and the reproductive isolation mechanisms that are in that on this question sheet. That stuff is directly on the quiz. There's a number of questions about it on the quiz, so you're definitely going to have that on hand when you do your quiz. Okay, and that's it for today. So that's in the second half. As you're going through here, doing the textbook reading, answering these questions, maybe after you've done the exit quizzes and you're like, there's an exit quiz by the way for both halves, and you're just like, I don't get this. Please, guys, post something in the chat. Send me an email. I'm here. I'm just sitting here marking stuff and looking at stuff all day, preparing, I guess, for my next course as well. But I'm doing mostly marking stuff from this course. Just say something, please. We can jump into a Google Meet. We can chat about it. You're not alone, okay? It kind of feels like you're alone, but I really would like to help. So anyway, let me know. A number of students are doing that, which is awesome. I just don't want you to feel like you're isolated. You're not. We can talk anytime. Okay, I'm going to let you get to this, and I'm going to stop talking. Let me know if you need anything, and I will see you at 11:05 for afternoon attendance, and we'll do our meditation. So let's have a look at question 8 here. Cool. Okay, so this question 8 is asking about sexual dimorphism. So sexual dimorphism is when one sex of a particular species has a unique characteristic that makes it more attractive to a particular mate. Okay, and in that case, that attraction, that trait, is going to evolve differently than that same trait in the other sex. So for example, going back to our graph here, okay, from before. So instead of saying dogs, let's just say number of blue jays. Number of, we'll say male. And the number of male blue jays, and then instead of height across the bottom, let's look at color brightness, okay? You can't see it. Sorry. Thank you for saying something. So I didn't do the whole thing. No one can see it. That would be good. I pressed the button, but it didn't do the thing. There we go. That looks right. Is this going on the stream? Yes. Okay. Okay, so number of male blue jays. We're looking at brightness of plumage here. So, in other words, this, as you go in this direction, plumage brightness increases. Okay, so what this is saying is that if this is sexual selection, okay, and you were to look at the female, and you know what, I'm actually going to color code this. So instead of saying, I'm going to say number of blue jays, and then we're going to have two different graphs here. We'll say number of male blue jays. Okay, and I'll do that in blue for male. And then in red, I'm going to do female blue jays. Okay, so if we look at the distribution for males and females, get rid of this. Okay, what it's saying in the question here is that the distribution for brightness of plumage for males, and it's usually going to take on a normal distribution where there's an average that's the most common brightness. There's some that are slightly brighter, some that are slightly less bright. Okay, and the same curve for females is identical. Okay, in other words, females and males have the same brightness. That is not sexual dimorphism. That means the male and the female do not have different selective pressures working on them. However, if females prefer a more brightly colored male, in other words, they like to mate with a more brightly colored male, then in that case, what will happen over time is that we will see a shift. Oops. Highlight. Oh boy, I'm having trouble with my pencil here. Over time, we're going to see a shift of just the male population to brighter plumage, because that makes the males more attractive to a female mate, and means that they'll reproduce more, and then there'll be more of that in the next generation. So in this case, the selective pressure is plumage color brightness. Brighter plumage means you get more lady blue jays. Okay, and this happens in nature all the time, where there's a specific characteristic that makes a particular male more prone to, or more able to mate. Okay, it makes it more attractive as a mating partner. It's usually males that are experiencing this selective pressure because of the differences between male and female reproductive strategies. So we kind of alluded to this earlier when we were talking about meiosis, but females are always focused on quality. And the reason for that is they have a limited number of eggs. So if you only make 1 egg or 2 eggs or 5 eggs, you want to, you're focusing on quality, and so you're choosy about your male partners. Males typically, because they're producing so much more sperm, are the opposite. So in most species, males are looking to mate with the maximum number of females because they're distributing their genetic material, whereas females are very choosy. So it's usually, in most species, this is not general across every single species, but in most species, the females are doing the choosing. They're being the choosy ones because they have a limited resource of eggs. And so it's usually the males that are experiencing these weird selective pressures. That would be like why you see like bright tails in male peacocks, but not in female peacocks. If females had a bright tail, that would make them susceptible to predators. So they actually have a selective pressure making their plumage less bright, just for females. Males have the opposite selective pressure, selecting for more bright, so that they are more attractive to females. So there's something between males and females. Yes. Sexual selection always means that there is one set of selective pressures acting on a male and a different set of selective pressures acting on the female. So that causes a difference between male and female of a particular characteristic. This doesn't obviously just apply to plumage. It can apply to anything. But if there's a difference between males and females of a particular species, that is always due to sexual selection. Because other than sexual selection, there's no reason for males and females of the same species to have any physical differences from each other. Why would they evolve differently? Why would a male have different characteristics than a female other than because of their because of these sexual selective pressures. There really is no reason. I mean, they have all the same requirements for survival, male and female do. They have the same requirements for shelter, for finding prey, etc., etc. I mean, you name it. Their requirements for survival are the same for males and females. The only difference is their requirements for finding a mate. And so then that is the selective pressure that causes dimorphism, or differences between male and female. So like one of the really cool examples of this is the idea of the stalk-eyed fly. Here, I'm going to show you what this looks like. Stalk, is it like this? Eyed fly. So this is a crazy fly where the male, and only the male, has these crazy long eye stalks. These eye stalks are terrible for the male. They make it so that they cannot see very well. They can't get away from predators very well. So, I mean, in many ways, these stalks are terrible for the flies. However, female stalk-eyed flies love those eye stalks. They really like them. And it improves their sexual success rate the longer their stalks are. Now, there is a selective pressure here pushing in the other direction, because if the male stalk-eyed fly has too long of an eye stalk, then it becomes untenable. Like, it can't survive if its eye stalks are too long. Then it can't get away from predators at all, then it can't see at all, and then it becomes... so there is a stabilizing selection acting on here as well that's keeping the stalks from going too long. However, the reason that they're so long in the first place, and by the way, female stalk-eyed flies look totally normal. They just have two eyes like on their head, just like a normal fly would have. So this is a huge dimorphism between males and females, and the only reason that difference exists is because of sexual selective pressures. So normally when you see a difference between male and female, that's pretty much the only evolutionary reason that is forcing a difference between males and females. Okay, and by the way, this applies to the human population too. So there are not a lot of characteristics that are different between human males and females, but there are some. And those selected differences between males and females are mostly due to sexual dimorphism, at least historically. So, and again, humans are animals too, so this applies to humans as well. So, anyway, getting back to question 8, it says, male and female blue jays are brightly and similarly colored. The key here is similar. So the fact that they're similarly colored, that is not caused by sexual selection. Sexual selection always causes a dimorphism, a difference between males and females. Okay, hopefully I answered that question. I think I did. No comment. Okay, I'm assuming that it did, but if not, please let me know. I'll circle back. Okay, cool. All right, so real quick before we get to the meditation component here, again, if people are interested, I'm really going to go through the project, because some people would like to do, and that's fine, would like to do the final project. Guys, if you're going to phone it in, okay, please don't do the final project, okay? If you're doing it just as like a thing to do and you're not planning on like giving a best effort here as something to improve your mark, don't bother, okay? I'm gonna count it only if you're it improves your mark. Okay, so this is like a true bonus. I am gonna do it as a bonus, but if you're not planning on giving a reasonable effort here, if you're trying to phone it in as something to do, please just skip it. Okay, I don't want to watch your 10-minute video if you're planning on phoning it in. So please don't do that. Now, if you do want to improve your mark, again, I highly encourage you to do it. I'm not saying don't do the assignment, but all I'm saying is like don't just throw this out here as like something to do if you're not really planning on giving a best effort. Okay, something to improve your mark. Okay, anyway, that being said, let's talk about what it actually is. So I clearly wrote on there that this is a bonus. Again, I only count it if it improves your mark. Why do I look at this again? Actions, preview. Okay. So again, you're shooting for a 5 to 7 minute presentation here. Realistically, you can do it in 5. 7 should be somewhere around the max length here. I'm not going to watch it after 9. Okay, so if it's passing 9 minutes, you're going way beyond the length of time that's reasonable for this. So I am really going to cut it off at 9, guys. So I did get some 15, 20-minute presentations for the last one, and that's great. Like, again, I appreciate the effort. People are really thinking about stuff. They have a lot to say, but you got to work on being concise. It just I don't have the time. So we're gonna limit that. I'm gonna say 9-minute hard cap. 7, you should be able to say everything you want to say. All right. So what is this going to be about? Today, and the reason I put off talking about it until today is because today you really talked about, or really looked at how natural selection works and this idea of patterns of selection. That's when nature is doing the selecting, right? The environment is choosing what is the best configuration of a particular species, which traits are the most desirable for survival and reproduction. Okay, or the partner is choosing. That's environmental as well, if it's sexual selection. What we're going to look at for this project is you're going to pick an example of artificial selection. Artificial selection is when humans pick. Okay, and we do this all the time. If pretty much any crop that you can think of that humans eat, yeah, that wasn't found in nature like that. So, for example, like let's look at what corn looks like natural corn. See if I can find a good picture here. There we go. There's the original corn plant right there, way back. Okay, do you see it on the right there? It's corn plant A. That's a corn plant, a natural corn plant. There are not many of these left in nature. Not many kernels on there. The kernels are extremely small. They don't contain a lot of starch, of sugar energy. And so the original corn plant, nature's corn plant, sucks for humans anyway as a crop. Okay? And over time, and this is actually a great diagram. I should put this in my note. Over time, yes, Evan, you could argue that. You could argue that humans are a natural force, I suppose, except by definition, when humans do something, we have labeled that. We have chosen as humanity to label that artificial. That is literally the definition of artificial, is that humans have chosen it. So when we're talking about like an artificial flavoring, yes, humans are a force of nature and we created the flavoring. So in some ways it is natural flavoring, but anything human created, we have chosen to call that artificial. That's the definition of artificial. So I guess it's a subset then of natural selection is artificial selection, if you want to think of it that way. Yes, because we are part of nature, but I think that is a valid distinction to make. Anyway, if we look at different iterations of corn plants here, you'll see over time, as humans have selected for more grains and larger grains and less fiber and more sugar in the grain, and that's just going through and looking at your corn crop and saying, okay, these 10 plants or these 3 plants are better than the rest. And then, again, because there's mutations happening in the corn naturally, and there is diversity in the corn due to the all of the genetic stuff that we've talked about previously. Well, you're going to find some variety, and if you just pick out the ones that are the best, at least for your uses as a human, over time you can really engineer the heck out of that thing through artificial selection. This is genetic engineering. This is the original genetic engineering, and it is absolutely genetic engineering. It's a form of genetic engineering. So over time, we built that thing on the far right there. Sweet, like that's a crop. That's something that we can use as humans. Okay, maximum food stuff for minimum effort. And we can look at other traits other than just like big kernels and stuff. Obviously, we do this same type of artificial selection for resistance to pesticide or blah blah blah. Okay, you name it, or resistance to pests. we can select this way. Now, the diversity that you're looking for has to be in the population in order for you to engineer for it with artificial selection. So there has to be a member of the population that is more resistant to pests or whatever. So in some cases, that doesn't exist in a population. For example, you don't find naturally a tomato that has a 2-month shelf life or like a 3-week shelf life. That doesn't exist in nature. Like you don't find that. So that's when we get into the other type of genetic engineering, where we're actually taking genes from a totally different species, like maybe a fish or something like that, and we're putting that into another species. So that's a different form of genetic engineering. Those are both genetic engineering. We call them both genetic engineering. But one of them is we were actually doing some gene editing. We're adding in genes using CRISPR technology and a whole bunch of other genetic engineering technology, which, by the way, you can do full degrees in this stuff in university if you're interested. There's a ton of research in the area of biotechnology, extremely useful. But the simpler way, obviously, is to find it already in the population and then just breed for that. Okay, so we do this with food crops. We do this with dogs. I mean, look around at the variety of dogs that are out there. They all came from the gray wolf in the last 50,000, well, not even 50,000, 10,000 years is when we really started engineering dogs. Like, it's bananas. There's quite a bit of variety in dogs. And that's just from choosing, oh, I like the one that has the longer ears, better hearing. This dog is better at hunting for whatever reason, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that's artificial selection, that idea. Hold on, where am I going here? Here we go. Okay, so you're going to pick something that humans have done that for. And wow, is there ever a lot to choose from here? We do this, like I said, we do this all the time. Pick a crop. You could talk about forestry, dog breeding. I mean, you name it. There's a million things, okay, that humans do artificial selection with in order to produce a more effective whatever, okay? So you're going to pick one of those things. And when you do this as humans, there are advantages to doing it. Obviously, you get to pick certain traits, but there are also disadvantages to doing it. We kind of touched on this earlier, but remember that when we're choosing the traits, we're also often removing diversity from a population when we do this. There's lots of examples of this, but even with dogs, you pick a dog breeding, there are disadvantages to inbreeding, which is what you have to do in order to isolate these particular genetic characteristics. You're breeding dogs within a small population that all share that trait, and that's just like inbreeding with humans. There are consequences of inbreeding, and again, this is what you guys are going to look into, okay? And the same thing is true, obviously, for crops as well. You can, if you remove genetic diversity, you make them more susceptible to pests and whatever. You can find evidence of all of this stuff if you guys investigate. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is you're going to demonstrate your knowledge of natural selection, because you're going to talk about this idea of selective pressures. What's the difference between artificial and natural selection? I just mentioned it here, but you can talk about it in more detail. And you're going to demonstrate your knowledge of the effects of artificial selection on whatever, okay, chosen species. That's the idea here, the basic idea of what you're trying to show me. So what do you need to include specifically? I mentioned on here that these are guidelines for slides. So you don't have to have one slide for each of these. I noticed on some of the other presentations, people are trying to get one slide per this idea or whatever. That's not necessary. So a general guideline is that you want a slide for about 30 seconds of presentation, but that's very, you can modify that quite a bit. If you have too much text on one slide, if it looks like a big bunch of text, just make it 2 slides. Like, you should be summarizing, right? You don't want a script on your slides. It shouldn't be everything that you're going to say. It's just a very brief point form summary of what you're saying, something for the audience to focus on while you're giving your presentation. But if you have too many points on one slide, you have 10 points, just make 2 slides. Like, it's not a big deal. So this isn't a guideline for the number of slides. It's a guideline for the information that you need to have. So just so you know. Okay, so you want a title slide. Yeah, you need at least one of those. With an appropriate title, you're going to make sure you talk about what industry or species that you're going to choose here specifically. It may not be a specific species, it may be a whole industry, and that's up to you. And then you're going to tell me a little bit about the difference between artificial and natural selection. Tell me about what the differences are. Tell me about what evolution is, okay? So what is the definition for evolution? We've touched on this a little bit, but look into that in a little bit more detail. And tell me about this idea of selective pressures. What's doing the selective pressure in each case? What is a selective pressure, etc. Okay, so the next slide here, you're going to actually get into the definition of evolution. In both of these cases, artificial and natural, evolution is occurring. What is evolution? Okay, I mean, it's the name of our unit, but how are both of these things causing evolution to occur, and what is evolution? In natural selection, okay, what's natural selection and how does it cause evolution? Okay, so by the way, this earlier part here, when I say in this section, you'll be discussing these things, it means you'll be discussing them under these headings. So you don't need to discuss them and then do all this stuff. You're going to discuss this by doing this stuff, okay? So you're going to tell me about evolution. What is it? Natural selection. What is it? How does it cause evolution? Give me some examples of natural selection. Tell me about artificial selection. What is it? How does it cause evolution? What are some examples? Okay, so that covers section 1. In section 2, you're going to tell me about your selected industry or species. Okay, so what is your example? Okay, why was it done? So specifically, why did we engineer this crop, or why do we do genetic engineering in this particular industry? How does it benefit the crop? Okay, what were we selecting for, or potentially against? So we did some selection here. What were we selecting for and against? And what was the process to artificially select for those traits? How did they actually do the selection? Did they go out and choose the 5 that had this trait, or whatever, or go out in the field and choose members that had that trait? Or there are other methods of doing this. How exactly was it done in your particular industry? Okay, what do they do to do the choosing? In like the dog breeding industry, how do they breed for better tracking ability or whatever? So investigate that. How are dogs bred? You need to do a little bit of research. Okay, and then the last part here is you're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of this artificial selection. Okay, so what advantages did it provide your industry? Did it create a more superior product? Did it increase productivity? So were you just able to produce more crop with less fertilizer? Or whatever. Specifically, what advantages did it provide that particular industry? Did it save money somewhere in the supply chain? Does it make the product lighter? Whatever. Okay. And then essentially here, you're going to be discussing what are the advantages that artificial selection has provided your industry. Okay. So what is the purpose of doing it in your species or industry? And then the last part here is the disadvantages. So yes, there are disadvantages to inbreeding, to making things genetically consistent. What are they? What are they for your particular species or industry? There are usually downsides to these. Great example, if you're interested, I should probably post a link to this, but maybe I'll post it in the chat right here. I was just looking at a video for a question that another student asked about the Gromy shell banana. So bananas are all the same. They're a specific variety. I'm not going to remember what the name of the current variety of banana is. Give me 2 seconds here. So this video is called The Terrifying Truth About Bananas. If you're interested. Oh, my ad blocker stopped working. That's annoying. But basically here, the issue is we genetically engineered bananas to be all the same. And the downside of that is that it made them more susceptible to a particular pest. In this case, it was a fungus. The name of the fungus is escaping me at the moment. Something rot. I can't remember what it's called. And that species of banana that we genetically engineered went extinct. Whoops. We actually couldn't prevent the spread of this fungus because it was so susceptible to this particular fungus that it made that type of banana go extinct. And then we had to start over again as a species. We had to re-engineer a new type of banana, which is the current banana that you find in stores. And guess what? It's happening again. It is also susceptible to a different type of fungus. And we are having some difficulty with banana crops currently and protecting it from that fungus. So there are definitely downsides here to this type of genetic engineering. So I want you just to discuss this here. Okay. specifically the really interesting question at the end here. In what ways could natural selection potentially be superior to what we are doing, and why would it potentially be superior for whatever reason for your crop? Okay, don't forget a works cited at the end. You're going to include a research sheet with this, just like you do with all of these assignments. Don't forget to do the research sheet when you're doing your research. It's really important that you're practicing that skill of taking the essence of whatever you're reading and writing it in point form on a research sheet and using that to create your final product as opposed to copying and pasting. Okay, really get in the habit of that now. The last thing I'd ever want to see is for one of you guys to go to university, get busted for plagiarism, maybe lose your scholarship or get kicked out. That's a real bummer. Okay, it happened to people I know. Don't do that. So like it's good idea to get in the habit of doing that already. Okay, so that's. Oh, hey buddy, thank you. So that's it for the presentation. Again, this is a bonus, so it's not required. You can do it if you want to do it. No pressure, but certainly if you're looking to improve your mark, that is a option that's available to you. So what we're gonna do now, if we're gonna be working on the stuff I already went over it for learning block 2. I'm gonna do meditation here with the people that are interested for 10 minutes, and if you're not interested, you can just do whatever you need to do. And if you need anything at all, learning block 3, please find me. Or I mean, again, even during learning block 2, you can type in the chat. You can do a Google Meet, but I'm always in the Google Meet just waiting for you during learning block 3. Anything you need at all, questions answered, help with the assignment, technical support for your support issues with Loom or whatever, come and see me. Okay, and we'll see if we can work any of that stuff out. All right, let's do some meditation.
So as you just take a moment or two to get comfortable, just setting up the exercise with the eyes open. Without moving the eyes, make sure you can see the space around you, either side, above, below. And just maintaining that very soft focus. Just beginning with some big deep breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And as you breathe out this time, just closing the eyes, allowing the breath to return to its natural rhythm. Beginning to feel the weight of the body pressing down, and different points of contact. Just settling into that space. And beginning to notice different sounds around you, just allowing those sounds to come and go. And bringing the attention back to the body now. Noticing any sense of heaviness or lightness in the body. Noticing if the body feels at all restless or perhaps particularly still right now. And then starting at the top of the head, just scanning down through the body, all the way down from head to toe. And as you become more aware of the body in general, starting to notice the breath, the movement of breath. Begin with just in a very general way, noticing which parts of the body move, that rising and falling sensation. And continuing to follow that movement, beginning to notice each and every breath, noticing if the breath's long or short, following each in-breath and each out-breath. And as you continue to follow each breath, just to help maintain that focus, just counting the breaths as they pass, realizing when the mind's wandered, each time just returning to that sensation. So as soon as you realize the mind's wandered, Just gently coming back to the breath each time. And now letting go of that focus, just for a moment, allowing the mind to be free. And as you bring the attention back to the body now, just coming back to that feeling of weight, of contact, coming back to the space around you, the sounds, the smells, just becoming more familiar. That space, the way you feel, posture. And then when you're ready, in your own time, you can just gently open the eyes again.
Okay, guys. I hope that was restful for you. All right. Again, I'll be here if you need anything.